Hello everyone, Simon Bard here, and welcome to a new Top 10 list. Well, 2018 had come and gone and was generally a mixed bag of a year for me, but I did have a good time when going to the movies. Yet unlike 2017 where I saw 59 movies, excluding rewatches, in 2018 I watched 48 movies, also excluding rewatches. And because of that, I won't be mentioning any runners-up as I saw less movies in the past year. And where some of them are pretty much okay by my taste, others were either good ones or bad ones. And like last time, I'm not including Disney's Marvel films, because I have yet to catch up with them. And I'm only going over the ones that I saw since they have something that interests me. And we'll start off by looking over my least favorite movies of the past year, and it won't be as you expect it to be. So, let's count down my top 10 list of my top 10 least favorite movies of 2018. Number 10. Skyscraper. It may seem like this action film would be on par with films like The Towering Inferno, but really it's more of a knockoff to Die Hard than any other film. A former FBI agent and war veteran, Will Sawyer, is assigned access to security for the tallest skyscraper in China. But when foreign terrorists set the building on fire and frame Will for the damage, he races through the flaming tower not only to stop the terrorists, but also rescue his family, who are residing and trapped inside. So yeah, it's pretty much a clone of Die Hard with only a few twists and okay action scenes. But it felt like the tower itself is more designed as a setup for the action and not just being a set. And there's too many occurrences where the hero isn't given a single chance to beat the villains, even with being framed and all. As is, it's all action and chaos with very little breaks and no sense of charm or fun that Die Hard originally had, and just basically ripped it off. Number 9. 8th grade. It's one thing to talk about the life of an 8th grader, it's quite another to see a film about one. And this one didn't grab me in the slightest. Kayla, a 13-year-old, tries to survive when spending the last week of her 8th grade year before starting high school. Yeah, it's simple enough, but to me, it's nothing special. It's supposed to show what it's like being in 8th grade, as it's a troubling time in transition. But this speaks more for the current generation than for every generation, and I didn't relate to it, since a lot of my middle school time was being homeschooled and not in real school. Also, the main lead's mostly an anti-socialite, despite making YouTube videos on how to better yourself, which ironically she doesn't follow. She has trouble fitting in with the popular group, wants to hang out with the older kids, and spends about 60 or 70% of the film on her phone. I mean, yes, it's understandable, but I feel like there needs to be more conflict or more good times, because as is, it's kind of embarrassing and not enjoyable, even when following only this character. It's a coming-of-age story that is noticeable, but is pretty much a bunch of nothing. Number 8. The Nun. Even though I'm not a fan of the Conjuring series, and I didn't see The Conjuring 2, the latest entry in this is the lamest, despite only one or two okay moments. This is a prequel to the whole series, beginning in the 1950s in Romania. When a nun in an abbey commits suicide, Father Burke, a priest of a haunted past sent by the Vatican, and Sister Irene, a nun who has yet to take her last vows, come to investigate the horrors of the abbey. There they uncover dark secrets that lie within, and they face an evil force as a demonic nun that haunts the cellar of the church. While it does make a connection to the first film and has an okay climax, the way this movie plays out isn't really scary. On occasion there's a jump scare or a creep moment, but there's barely anything else that happened to get me invested. Even then, the horror cliches it has isn't much. Overall, this horror flick does the bare minimum, and tries some scares, to which I feel it has none of. Number 7. Kin. When I saw the poster for this film, I was expecting a sci-fi action flick, and for the first few minutes, it felt like it. But as it continued and eventually ended, I was very disappointed. Based on the short film Bagman, a boy named Eli comes across a futuristic gun that he can control. But his older brother Jimmy returns home after being in prison, and tries to pay back a crime boss with money he took. But soon Jimmy and Eli's father gets shot, and the boss's brother gets shot while getting the money. And both Jimmy and Eli had to go cross-country, with Jimmy making a lie to his little brother about what's happening, while the boss chases them down for revenge, as well as 2 soldiers from the future looking for the gun Eli took. And that's really it. There are a few neat effects in the film, but it's mostly a road movie with a lie that takes too long to be revealed, the older brother trying to be good yet brings his little brother to places and do stuff he's too young for, and all the futuristic stuff is more of a side note until the ending, which, not to give too much away, goes for more of a Terminator route. And honestly, I'd much rather see the future stuff as opposed to what the film really is. A cross-country chase film about brothers trying to reconnect. And based on the title, it kind of explains it. Nothing much to say except that the film was really a product of false advertising that never interested me. Number 6. Searching. On the one hand, it's a suspenseful flick with a much more larger scale than how the Unfriended movies did. But on the other hand, it's a mess of twist after twist with a final resolution that could have been better handled. After the death of his wife, David Kim becomes a good father to his 16-year-old daughter, Margaret. But once his daughter disappears, a police investigation happens, and David, with the help of Detective Rosemary Vick, contacts Margaret's friends and views photos, videos, and other sites for clues through his daughter's laptop, and becomes increasingly desperate as the police search continues to dwindle. Outside of the opening being a done-to-death cliché, this film almost had me invested, with its sharp editing, suspenseful build-up, and nice cinematography. But overall, it's a big mess. There's way too many twists and turns and points of the film ending, more so than The Last Jedi. Its one main lead is so desperate that he has no idea how the internet works, and the final resolution is not only unexpected, but is really unbelievable in a realistic manner. I'm not going to give it away, but how the ending is brought up felt very wrong and illegal, considering who's behind it and why. All I can say is that this movie had me hooked in where it's going and how it's done, but ultimately is a failure in where it ended. Number 5. The Nutcracker and the Four Realms. Out of all the Nutcracker film adaptations out there, this one is sort of weak. It rehashes other films that Disney did, like The First Chronicles of Narnia and Alice in Wonderland from Tim Burton, but also has uninteresting characters, a cliché story, cluster designs, and messy effects. There's even a surprise villain that didn't bother me too much, despite the fact that the other character built up as the villain is nothing, and even raises questions to the other characters and the world they inhabit. At times there's an idea or two that's interesting, and the reorchestration of the Nutcracker music is neat, but they're the only small highlights for a gloomy and depressing looking movie. There's really nothing grand about it, and it's one of the lamest of Christmas movies to watch. Number 4. A Wrinkle in Time. Yep, another film from Disney, but a bit worse this time. I never read the book, and I vaguely remember the TV movie, yet the cinematic tone of it didn't grab me at all. It felt boring, sort of cliché, even if they're from the book, and the whole film isn't too engaging. Sure, the effects are nice, especially the time wrinkle effects, and maybe a couple of the characters are okay, but they don't help in distracting me from everything else in the movie. With many overly used clichés from other fantasies, the mixing of science and fantasy is very underwhelming, the songs used are distracting, and overall, I didn't care what was going on. It isn't as impressive as I thought it would be, and for the most part, it seemed like nothing. It really isn't anything but a huge waste of time. Number 3. Hellfest. When it comes to horror films, this one is as cliché as they come. And when the ending isn't anything typical, it still doesn't excuse the bore fest that happened. A small group of friends spent Halloween night going to the horror theme park called Hellfest, and even with talks of a mass serial killer stalking theme park goers, they turn out to be true, as the killer goes around the park killing his victims, as well as the leads, one at a time. It's about as standard and dull as slasher movies go. Nothing too interesting goes on for a majority of it, and even then the killings aren't impressive. But when the film's ending showed up, it's so different from the rest of the film that it makes one wonder how this came to be, and what would have happened if it went in a different direction with the ending in mind. Yet it's hard to imagine the scenario when the rest of the film isn't engaging. I hated how the film ended, and I didn't have any fun with the whole flick. It's just like any other slasher film, but with a very weak conclusion. Number 2. Slender Man. Now, of course, this movie's more based around the character and its legends than the popular horror survival game. But with that said, it's the most lamest and unforgiving films I've seen in the past year. 4 friends heard legends of the Slender Man, and even tried to conjure him up. But despite them thinking it's all fake, they soon realize it's all real when one goes missing during a class field trip to a historic graveyard. And okay, one of them doesn't believe at all, even if she witnessed it, and one believes in it too much, but do I care at all to what's going on? No. The Slender Man himself is barely seen, it's shot too dark, most of the unsettling imagery has nothing to do with the character, and it all ends very bleak and depressing, with no likable characters, bland effects, and lame story. In a way, I wouldn't mind seeing a Slender Man movie, but not like this. It's too much of a downer flick to enjoy, but not as anger-filled as the last one. And my number 1 least favorite movie of 2018 is Mary Poppins Returns. Yeah, the one movie that's been getting more advertising only within the last few months, and is promoted as being Disney's biggest holiday flick, is nothing but a restructured retelling of the first film, with new ideas that are overblown, unbalanced, and have nothing to do with what Mary Poppins is like. And this would have been P.L. Traveler's worst nightmare if it went this direction. Jane and Michael Banks have grown up, with Michael working for the bank and Jane fighting for women's rights. But Michael's home from the original is being repossessed by the bank, and is given 5 days to find a share of the house left by his father. Yet as he and Jane are fighting the share, Mary Poppins comes back to take care of Michael's 3 children, and even look after Michael with his situation. Thus the bank's children are having a fun time being with Mary going on magical adventures, even with Lamplighter Jack joining in, who's an apprentice of Bert. But soon the kids find out what's going to happen to their home, and try to figure out how to help. But in saying all that, it's a sequel to Mary Poppins that in no way is like the original. The characters aren't enjoyable, the story is backwards and unbalanced, the songs are forgettable, and the effects range from fake to pretty good. I would give it the benefit of the doubt for at least trying to be like the original in spirit, but even with years having passed and rewatching the original as a refresher, the sequel is overblown and cluttered with no real reason to exist, and a plot that didn't need Mary Poppins in the first place, especially with how it all ends. While it is good to see those fantasy moments with the 2D segments and whatnot, there's likely too many of them, and sometimes they tie into the main story, where the original did not. Not to mention having more in common with bedknobs and broomsticks than Mary Poppins, and not even the cameos from the originals couldn't save it. It goes completely against what the original is like and being entirely pointless. And with all that said, this is definitely my number 1 least favorite movie of 2018. And that is it. So thank you for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Facebook or Twitter, support me on Patreon, and until next week as I look over my top 10 favorite movies of 2018.